Welcome back to the second part of our discussion on Myristica swamp forests of Western Ghats. So far, we have discussed the occurrence of Myristica swamps in different parts of Western Ghats, and we have talked about the floristic characteristics, the flora of Myristica swamps. I just tried to give you a nutshell. It's not like I have mentioned all the species there and all the characteristic features because it's not possible. You'll have to visit there and stay there for at least 2 or 3 years to at least get a minuscule idea about what Myristica swamps are. Because the more you stay there, the more new perspectives you get. So, in this second part, we are actually discussing the animal biodiversity here. So, uh, initially, when I went to the field, that was in 2004, 2005, at least in the initial part of 2004 and 2005, I was naive. I was just out of college. And so when I started seeing a lot of animals there, different groups, and a lot of biodiversity, I was really thrilled. So I was like, okay, this is great. There are so many animals there. So even though we were focusing on herpetofauna, there was a lot of time to look around. So, a very casual documentation led to the documentation of at least 362 invertebrates, individual species. So, there is photographic documentation for that. That is why I said 362. But of course, there is a lot more because it's not easy to run after insects in a swamp, which is always sucking you down. And it's very hard to not to stumble when you're running after especially insects because they fly around very fast. Then the lighting conditions are abnormal, so it's literally impossible for us to at least get a photo documentation. So at a very minimal estimate, it was 362 invertebrates, but well, for vertebrates we had a better number, especially because it's easy to identify and it's better, we have better chances of documenting them. So it was 281 vertebrates. So when we look at Kerala's land area, we have been harping about this less than 2 kilometers square. So that is a very small part of the entire land area of the Kerala state. So it's something like less than 0.03%, it's something like that. Very minuscule speck. So it's like if you're a satellite, you miss and you blink and you miss. It's just like that. It's such a small speck. But in this very small region, we could see a lot of diversity. It was like 23% of the butterflies, 11% of the spiders, 8.4% of the fishes, and more than 50%, more than 20% of the reptiles, 26.6% of the birds, and 6.6% of the mammalian diversity, which was the lists which were present in 2007. I'm not talking about the present because a lot of taxonomic upheavals have happened. I'm talking about then. So at that particular time, that is 2007, 8, 9, comparing with the lists which were present then, this was the state. So now, like I have already told you, there has been a long break. Of course, we have made some visits to the Myristica swamps, and a casual observation has told us that there are some differences which have happened, especially in the situations which are there, and we'll be discussing that later. But this, in a nutshell, this was the diversity there. And if you would like to just break it up, this 362 species which we were able to photo document, this was the breakup between the different general groups and phylums and all that and the classes. Then again, there were a lot of things which we could not, because we know taxonomy is an enormous subject and it's literally impossible for one or two people to document everything to species level. So there was a lot of things which was just left like that. We had a lot of photos, we saw a lot of animals which we couldn't do anything about because we just did not have the time and resources to identify at that particular time. So this is a very minimal estimate of a very casual, it's like walking in the forest and you see something and you photograph it, and this is a very minimal estimate. So why I'm saying this is, like, see, when you are planning to study something about the Myristica swamps, especially in Maharashtra and Goa, it would be good to form a good big enough team which consists of different groups of people specializing in different animal groups, so that you can have a comprehensive report. And then at the same time, the more people go into the Myristica swamps, the higher chances of it getting disturbed. So that is also there. So there has to be a balance between how much research has to be done and how much is needed to conserve. So it is not always about human beings. It is not always about what we know, but it is more about conservation. So when we were searching for Chirigala, it was like Dr. Satish Chandran, he never divulged as the correct position of Chirigala. And he always used to say that it's better that some places remain unknown and untouched. So that is the same thing which I'd like to say. While studies are very important, sometimes it is good to leave some places unknown. But all the same, it would be good if you could have a very good idea about what you're going to do there. So, like we said, we haven't even looked at the microorganisms in Kerala, and as far as I know, in Uttara Kannada also. So, it would be very good if such sort of very pre-planned plan is made so that you can do document the biodiversity of Myristica swamps in Maharashtra. Then this was the breakup of the insect diversity. So like I said, only those species which were photo documented, it was 281. Lepidopterans, we could identify 122 species, of course, because it was comparatively easier to identify than anything else. That was the main reason, and they're very catchy. And then again, the times when a person who is say looking into herpetofauna, so we go there early in the morning and then we stay there till 11 o'clock. So there is a time when you're free, when you're not looking into herpetofauna. So that is the time when the butterflies are coming. Then again in the evening, you go in there for the night sampling for the amphibians, and that is the time when the moths are there. So there was a sort of a undue advantage for lepidopterans, which is why we were able to document a lot of lepidopterans there. Then again, we were very shocked that we could only document 18 odonats from the Myristica swamps. So, at that time, we thought why it is like that. But when you're only looking at of course, there were so many other odonats just outside. So you go out of the Myristica swamps, you look at the streams which are flowing out in the open area, or if you even go to the nearby colonies, you see a lot of odonats. But these were not present inside the swamps, even though there was this a lot of uh, water there. So this exactly shows why these animals have been said to be bioindicators, because the quality of water, it is not like it has been polluted by human beings, but a lot of leaves are falling in, it is being decomposed. So what is the quality of water there? Is it actually fit for these odonats to lay in eggs? So of course there are, like I said, each swamp is different. So in swamps, there were places where we did not have anything at all. But in various other swamps, we did have a lot of diversity. So this keeps varying. Then we were not able to look into the canopy. So that is completely another story. What would be the diversity in the canopy that has not even been looked into? So again, if you want to do some research in Kerala, these are the holes, the lacunae, which I'd like to identify for you that you could focus. Then vertebrates, the breakup was like this, 14 species of fishes. So then again, that was quite funny because when you're looking just outside the Myristica swamps, so if you're making a strict boundary and we're just looking outside the Myristica swamps, there were lot of other species which were, in the streams outside. But deep in the Myristica swamps, the numbers were very less. So was it because the water was not means good enough for them, or lack of oxygen? There are a lot of questions there. We did some soil and water analysis, but because the results varied from swamp to swamp, we were not able to give a conclusive answer for that. Then amphibians and reptiles were the two groups which we actually focused on. But then again, that time was a time where the taxonomy of amphibians was completely, reshuffled. So whatever we documented, we do have the photo documentation and the specimens are there in KFRI. But then we were unable to, brush up on it and to give the correct identification to a lot of species, especially bush frogs. There were a lot of bush frogs which we were unable to identify at that time using the existing keys then. So, and we had limited permission for collections. So we couldn't go more into that. So there is a lot of things which is actually waiting to be discovered. So I'm talking about a place, say 2 kilometers square place, where we have spent around 3 years almost every day and every night. We have been doing such intensive field work. Yet I'm saying that there is a lot more to be discovered. because that is the limits of human beings. There is a lot more. Then of course we did not have all the technology and all which we, and the access to so many resources which people, researchers do have right now. So you have a very good opportunity to take up these things. Then we found Vigiachelis sylvatica, the cane turtle. So we all know it was first reported in 1881 by Henderson. Then it was in 1981 that Vijaya rediscovered it. Then after that, ours was the first report. Then later on, based on that, a lot of other people, people like Deepak and Arun, they they scoured the forests of Kerala and they finally were able to locate a good, a higher population of Vigiachelis. So here, what I'd like to focus is more than the number of animals which we are able to document. There was a gradation there. So when you're looking at those swamps, which are sort of, they have this thick ecotone, there is a lot more animals. But when we come to the typical Myristica swamps, highly inundated, having a lot of stilt roots, and it's completely covered over, the number of animals there becomes very limited. Only a few animals are able to survive there in such conditions. At least in large numbers. Of course, in lower numbers they are there, but in large numbers only few. There were a few dominant animals, just like we had a few dominant plants. But whatever they were, the speciality was the high endemism. So 16 percentage of all the animals were actually endemic to Western Ghats. That is, see, when I'm giving you these figures, please note I am talking about the lists and the data which was present in 2007, 8, 9, and not which is currently there. But it gives you, there may be some changes here, but still it gives you a good enough idea about how precious this particular region is. We found that no animal was exclusively confined to Myristica swamps, but like I have already said, Mercurana myristica palustris, it's a frog which has been recently discovered, and it was said to be endemic to Myristica swamps of Kerala. And the Myristica bamboo tail, that is a damselfly which was reported by Subramaniam to be endemic to the Myristica swamps of Karnataka. So there are such reports there. Then endemism in amphibians, then fishes and reptiles, especially those animals which were found there, it was quite high. So as usual, we see the vertebrates, the bigger animals, they take the prize in such things. The number of red listed animals, the percentage of red listed animals were also very high there. But then again, there is a lot of lacunae there, a lot of frogs, a lot of reptiles. They were still sort of like, data deficient. We had no idea. And then the entire sort of taxonomy changed. So these figures will change. But there is no denying the fact that a lot of animals which are found or which were recorded during those years in the Myristica, they were on the red list at that particular time. So I'm just showing you some photographs which we had documented from the Myristica swamps. These are of the odonates and the butterflies and other odonates. Then again, butterflies. You can see the map butterfly here, very curious type of a butterfly here. Then then you can see the swordtail, which was actually in the running for the national butterfly. It's basically my favorite. Uh, then a lot of hesperids were there. I haven't shown you all the photos of the butterflies also. A lot of hesperids were there, and we were not able to identify them properly. We didn't have permission for collecting them. So that was a problem. Then a lot of spiders. I have to thank Dr. P.A. Sebastian, the late Dr. P.A. Sebastian, for helping us to identify the spiders. And then the fishes. Here I have to thank Dr. C.P. Shaji for helping us to identify the fishes. Then the amphibians were actually our Achilles heel, because whatever was existing, the taxonomy there, it completely changed. So at that time, all of these were limnocharis, but all of these were limnocharis. Now they have completely changed. So these were Indorana at that time. Thankfully, they are Indorana right now. Then the Nyctibatrachus major, Alicia minor. Then here there is a big change, because at that time this was Rana temporalis, this was Rana aurantiaca. Now temporalis is not even reported from Kerala. This has to be a Hyla rana species, and this also is a Hyla rana species. So then we had a lot of tree frogs, Rhacophorus, then the Polyperatus group, then the bush frogs. So most of these bush frogs we were not able to identify properly. We just had to stop at saying Philotus. Now even Philotus has changed; it has become Raus Justice. So these are waiting to be rediscovered, or say we can say re-identified, because a lot of uh, uh, surprises are waiting up there. Every photo here has a story actually, and had it been sort of a workshop where you and I we were interacting, we could have interspersed all of these photographs with that personal story. Okay, what was the story behind how you got the photograph of this? Did you were we able to collect this? All that stuff. So there is a lot of stories behind. A lot of memories are made when we go for field work. So there was a time when actually our camera was there was only one camera for the botany and the zoology guys, and it was given for servicing. And then we got a bright yellow toad, and we had to photograph it. So we didn't want to kill it. We knew that what it was. It was the common Asian toad. So we took it to Koltupura town, and I went to a photographer because the boys with me, they said they won't be doing anything with it. So I went to the photographer and said, "See, I need a photograph." And he just stared at me because I was coming directly from the forest, completely disheveled, mud on my dress because I'm coming from the swamp. And he said, "Don't you think you should freshen up?" Then I just took out my case and said, "This is the guy who has to be photographed." And then we could say the rest is history, because all the people from the nearby shopping complex, they all came to stare at me. But then after some time, the people in Koltapura, they got used to these people going to the forest in the muddy clothes. And they were very, very, very cooperative. And at this juncture, I have to thank all those people there also, because without their cooperation, it would have been literally impossible to stay so many years there in the forest and do field work. So then again, the reptiles of Myristica swamps. Uh, there was a lot of Nemaspis species. Again, we couldn't identify many of them. And the snakes were there. I have only kept some photographs, different color morphs of Trimeresurus malabaricus, especially this golden morph. This was very common there. And we could see even a temperamental difference. Now, when we compare the animal wealth of Myristica swamps in Kerala and Karnataka, I've just made a comparison here. So these yellows are from Karnataka, and this blue, the pinks are from Kerala. So the total number of swamps, the number of swamps sampled, and the number of swamps is intensively sampled for animal wealth. So here we are actually talking about only secondary literature. This comparison has been made only on secondary literature, because we haven't done any study in Uttara Kannada. Then again, study area, then sampling time, then again the number of species per general groups like mammals, birds. So overall, we see that the graph is much more higher in the case of Kerala. But I would say that it could be due to two reasons. One of it could be because of the intensive sampling which we did, and the long period of time, comparatively longer period of time. And the second thing is maybe there is a latitudinal gradient. So as you go down to the southern hemisphere, there is more diversity. So that is the theory which we study in ecology. So that could also be the reason. Then again, when you're looking at the swamps in Kerala and when we look at the swamps in Karnataka, at least the swamps which I had visited in Karnataka, they were, literally surrounded by human habitations and agricultural land. So they were in dire straits. And the type of swamps we see in southern Kerala, where there is, inundation all over the year, where the water is always there, and there is a complete carpet of this Myristica fetua magnifica roots. That is literally, I didn't see anything of that stuff in Karnataka. So there is a big difference. Most of the swamps in Kerala, at least which are present as of now, they are in reserve forest. So they have sort of an immunity. Even though there is some sort of disturbance going on, there is a lot of disturbance going on, knowingly or unknowingly, then the natural changes are also happening. Succession is happening, climate change is happening, water drought is happening. So that there is degradation which is still going on, but at least they were in a better shape. So the lessons which we take from there is that, see, when you discover, you start discovering the Myristica swamps in Maharashtra, you should sort of plan a survey in that entire belt. Okay, these are the abiotic conditions based on the previous study. So at least do a survey in the entire region. So maybe you'll be able to locate more patches there, and then start formulating a plan where you can, sort of document the biodiversity without harming them. So right now I'm in two minds. So when people ask me, should we study in the Myristica swamps of Kerala, the researcher in me says, okay, yes, because there is so much to be discovered. But the person who is madly in love with the Myristica swamps, she says, okay, you're also going to there. Are you going to dig up? Are you going to collect? So that sort of a two-mindedness does come. I know this is purely subjective, but that those decisions are better left to individuals and institutions. Another very important thing which we found was that, see, the green one is this green line, it shows the number of individuals, and this one is the sighted inside the swamp, and the number of individuals sighted outside the swamp. So we had actually done a comprehensive sampling, where we did this comprehensive sampling was done in 15 swamps of Koltupura, and we compared it with the patches just outside the swamp. So this green line indicates inside the swamp, and this orange line indicates outside the swamp. And this one, it actually indicates the number of species. So one very funny thing which we saw was that, see, in the summer season, there is a sudden jump in the number of individuals present inside the swamp, whereas in just outside the swamp, just the opposite happens. In the rainy season, this wide difference, it sort of like, becomes almost, they come closer together. So I was talking, this is about amphibians. Then again, when we just look at the, when we start looking at the number of species, also we see a similar difference, but it's not that, highlighted. So we, after, after doing this fieldwork and after a lot of other surmises, we would like to propose that these swamp patches which lie in the middle of the jungle, at least during the summer months when there is no water all around, the water is sort of like draining away, many of these very vulnerable amphibians, they come over to the swamp in large numbers. And but what happens in the rainy season is there is so much of inundation, many species which wouldn't like to have so much of water, or which are not suited to sit on top of the say knee roots and stilt roots and wait their time out, they rush out of the swamps, they go out of the swamps, and they are in the ecotone region. But in the rainy season, this happens, and but in the summer season, when the inundation goes down, and the outer regions are drier, many of them come into the swamps. So in a sense, these Myristica swamps are not only a heaven for these Myristicaceae trees, they are also a heaven for many of these unknown, undiscovered amphibians also. So that is another reason why we need to conserve these Myristica swamps. Then in the case of reptiles also, we saw that the number of individuals increasing during the dry seasons, especially in the January, February month, was a common phenomena. But the number of species didn't show much of a fluctuation over the months. We found that the beta diversity between the outside of the swamp and the inside of the swamp in the case of reptiles wasn't very high. Whereas in the case of the uh, amphibians, there was a big dissimilarity. So that could be because of the physiological requirements of these two animal groups. Then overall, because we don't have time to look into everything, overall, in a nutshell, I would like to say that the composition of herpetofaunal population, just as in the case of trees, they were dominated by a few species. So in the case of amphibians, it was Nyctibatrachus major, then what was then known as Limnonectes carolensis, now it is Minervaria carolensis, Euphyctus cyanophyctus, and Hylorana. That time it was known as Rana temporalis. So these form the bulk of the species, and they are generally generalists. And in the case of this Hylorana, it actually takes a lot of advantage. It is sort of semi-arboreal. It always sits on the roots, the knee roots and the stilt roots, depending on how much inundation there is. Then Nyctibatrachus and Euphyctus, they always take advantage of the streams wherever there is shallow water. They are there, and this Minervaria carolensis, it's more onto the margins of the swamp. So we could see that gradation there. So I really wish that I had the time and resources to go back and start doing, better studies, in-depth studies. When we come to the reptiles, Trimeresurus malabaricus, the Malabar pit viper, in some places, in once or twice in a 100-meter transit, we were able to get 10 individuals. And that may be because of the very cool nature and because of the abundance of, prey, and also because usually people in their right minds, they don't go venture into the swamp, so these snakes are they left completely undisturbed. So almost 22.8 percentage of the entire population, that was basically made up of Trimeresurus malabaricus. Then from the lizard side, Calotus idioti, then Eutrophis macularia, and Sphenomorphis dulcimeri, these three were the most dominant. All of them belongs to this, except they belong to the Cincidae and the Agamid family. Then Xenocrophis pisciator was also present in many of the swamps. Then all of them are endemic also. Then we also did a disturbance level classification. So first of all, we looked at what was the classical Myristica swamp. So when you're looking at the classical Myristica swamp, which is inundated all over the year, and it has got this level of inundation, all over the swamp, the inundation is almost at a same level, and there is a lot of Myristica magnifica, that is the dominant tree. So majority of the vegetation is Myristica magnifica. Then what is the surrounding atmosphere? Is it a human habitation? Is it a cultivated land? Based on all of this, we made an indice, and based on that, we actually tried to classify the 15 swamps in Koltapura, where actually we did in-depth studies both on disturbance and the faunal aspects. And we found a lot of disturbances here, including, say some cultivation for cultivation of illegal plants, and maybe brewing of illegal liquor, all of that was there. Then in this case, there is a culvert which has been made here. This was the misguided enthusiasm of the institution itself. Then sometimes when fire lines, that is actually a very good thing. But at the same time, when fire lines are made, what happens is there is an ecotone. There may be there is a swamp here, and there is a swamp here, and there is a small ridge here, and this ridge has been made as the fire line. So what happens to that particular pathway? What happens to the ecosystem there? What is the effect of that? So there are so many questions which happen there, which I'm leaving for to you to actually answer. Then the minor forest produce collection, animal traps, a lot of things did happen there. Uh, so then another very controversial thing is like, see, initially, at least in the olden times, when we did have the Myristica swamps as sacred groves, especially I've seen in Karnataka and all, because of this presence as a sacred grove, people revere this, and a lot of pujas are done, and because of that, nobody touches these trees. But as we people are becoming techno savvy, or I don't know, modern, what happens is even the sacred grove pujas have changed. So there is a lot of plastic, there is a lot of loudspeaker. It has actually become a tourism spot. So in our area where I actually worked, there was a place called Shasta Narat. There is a very iconic temple there. Every year there is a festival there. And this festival, the pandal is made in the just nearby swamp, which is also known as Shastanada. And a lot of pollution happens, a lot of tourism occurs. And this is not the mindful tourism where the forest is conserved. It basically, it is local people coming and maybe a few people from outside, but to some extent it leads to a lot of situations like this, where people get drunk and mindlessly they just cut the stills of the roots, and after some time the tree just sort of topples over after some time. There have been a few instances of forest fire, then waste dumping. So all of these, then exotic species, there is an then again, another thing which we have seen is like, see, when there is a human habitation or a cultivated area very near to the swamp, what they do is they just plant one say plantain tree, banana tree, or one arecanut tree just into the forest area. Then after some time, another tree is done just like that. Slowly, slowly, a sort of an encroachment happens, and it happens so slowly that people just don't notice this sort of a thing happening. So this is not done by the people who are the children of the forest. This is not done by the tribes who are actually, depending on the forest for their livelihoods. But this is done by people like us who go in there and who sort of intermarry with the tribals. And there is a lot of social issues there, which it's better I don't speak here. But when you actually go to the field and when if you guys are going to the forest and you are working closely with the communities there, you find that people like us, we always find ways to circumvent the rules made for the protection of not only the forest but also the indigenous communities. And whenever something happens, the indigenous communities are blamed. So that is a tragedy there. These are the things which we have to think about. So again, coming back to the grading, what we understood that except for two swamps, that was Udaranjira and Muppadadi, almost all the others were disturbed, and two of them were very severely disturbed. So, in a nutshell, we could say that when we're talking about plants, few specialist trees were dominant. There was very less diversity inside the swamps and more evenness outside the swamps. Then, when you look at animals, again, we find high diversity in the swamps. More specialists are present during the rainy season, but lesser diversity is present in the rainy season when compared to the dry season. The number of individuals in the swamps during the dry season is much higher. So we could sort of like say that this could be a heaven for the vulnerable animals like amphibians in the dry season. Then, when you look at the environmental characters, we found inundation to be the most defining criteria. That is perennial inundation and inundation at a particular level. Then a thing which I did not mention here is that when you look at the life tables of the trees, what we see is that when you're just measuring this GBH of the trees, we see trees, huge trees, we can't even measure them properly. So once upon a time, ancient trees are still standing there. Then we see the small pole-sized trees. So what happened to the trees in between? Some disturbances did happen, is it not? So such disturbances in the past are also being indicated by the trees which are still standing there, the tree communities which are still standing there. And what we learned was that intensive study in a very small region is fruitful because we get a long type of, a lot of insights about that particular ecosystem. But at the same time, our greatest, failure was that we couldn't continue with the study. We studied starting from 2004 November onwards till almost almost June of 2008, July of 2008, till I got placed as a college lecturer. Then after that, then the funding also stopped. So what we need is a dedicated team and then infrastructure. So people, even my PhD scholars, I would love them to go back to Meristica swamps, but they don't have the type of infrastructure. So when you are in an institution like KFRI, which has the vehicles, drivers with ethics, so that irrespective of your gender, you can go very with full faith, you can go with them in full faith and you can come back safely. All that stuff is actually needed. So unless and until that sort of a support is not there, we cannot do good studies. So our start was very good, but somewhere there we had to stop because we didn't have the required funding and other support. Then another one important thing which we understood was that it is not necessary that more diversity, more number of species is a good thing. Sometimes in an ecosystem, very special ecosystem like Meristica swamp, less number of species may mean that this particular ecosystem is very healthy. So we have actually done a paper on that based on butterflies. So we have just classified the butterflies into specialists and generalists, and based on that, we have tried to grade the swamps. So then another thing which we understood was that animals as bioindicators, especially when you look at the presence of ordonates in the different swamps, these are actually, they indicate minute changes, and we have to study more about, we have to invest more into such studies. And like, all this time you had this Meristica swamps in Maharashtra and we didn't know about it. So we need to become more aware about our own backyard. So with this, I'd just like to say thank you very much for listening to me. Best of luck. And I hope you enjoyed your journey into Meristica swamps. Once again, I'm sorry I was not there to talk with you directly and answer your queries, but it was really a medical emergency, something which I couldn't. Okay then, bye.